Benjamin Bratton. In 30 words or less, tell us who you work for and what you do.
I'm Associate Professor of Visual Arts at the University of California, San Diego, and Director of the Center for Design and Geopolitics at CalIT2, the California Institute of Telecommunications and Information Technology. I'm a writer, and my work sits at the intersections of social and political philosophy, computing and information technology, and architecture and urbanism.
Do you have a website?
Yes, my website is bratton.info, and the center's website is designgeopolitics.org.
What website can you not live without?
I'm going to say arg.org, 4A's RG.org, it's a theory file sharing site.
Any internet hero?
No, I would, not really. Well, I would say, you know, as they sometimes say, that it's not so much that we'll discover life on another planet as we will define something that we've already discovered and call it life. I guess my inspiration with the internet is the idea that something that we've already created, something that already exists, will, when we look back on it from the future, be something that we realized was living, was alive, was already a sentient entity, and something that we are already coexisting with.
Cities cover 2% of the Earth's crust and account for 50% of its population. Does this statistic fully highlight the importance of architects and designers in facilitating a harmonious world?
Well, it may do the opposite. It may indicate that perhaps we overstate the role of top-down formal design of architects and designers to produce cities. I mean, cities are in a way a kind of organic, natural phenomenon, and they happen as a kind of bottom-up assemblage of financial networks, logistical networks, migration networks, information networks. And in many ways, I think that the most interesting things going on in cities are the kind of informal urbanisms that become created. I think the real challenge for cities, I think that the real ethical challenge and design challenge for cities going forward has to do with this dynamic, where on the one hand we have cities that are maybe very informal, but those are also forms of urbanism where a kind of public sphere or public space might actually continue to exist. And on the other hand, the highly designed cities may in fact also be increasingly privatized. And it's this dynamic between the informal and the formal, the public and the private, that in many ways I think will drive the city going forward.
Can willingness to do good in the world be promoted through better design and better architecture? And what can be done to foster and encourage more social entrepreneurs and innovators? Well,
again, I think that innovation and invention happens in response to particular kinds of needs and emergencies. And I think the real thing we need to focus on is how it is that inventions and innovations that happen in one place can actually have impact above the local scale. How can they come to be the basis of a new form of collective self-governance? And perhaps the internet in a way provides one model for this, of a kind of set standards and protocols that have allowed different ideas and innovations to reach a critical mass easily and quickly. And as cities become increasingly informational, become a kind of hybrid of physical virtual space, perhaps that model is one that we'll make use of in new kinds of ways. But again, it's the issue of scale and enforceability of innovation that is really, at this point, I think, the critical issue.
Technology is being used as a tool to enlighten, educate, and liberate people around the world. How far would you agree with that statement?
Well, it is, but it's also doing the opposite, and it's doing both equally, perhaps in radical ways. I think that there's a tendency to think about technological innovation in terms of a kind of amplification of its efficacy, but a pathological system that we simply increase its abilities, its computational abilities, for example, simply exacerbates the pathology. It doesn't solve the problem. But I think one of the interesting things that is happening with technology, particularly digital technology, is the way in which things that used to be exchangeable assets, music, film, software, even political records, have now become, in a way, because they are digital, something that is in essence unownable. They become part of the commonwealth again, where instead of something that was commonly owned that has now become capitalized, in fact, the opposite has happened, where something that was capitalized has now become the commonwealth again. And I think that our political imagination or design imagination as to what that commonwealth can do, what that commonwealth can be, how we govern it, how we make use of it, how we curate it, is where our social entrepreneurship should be focused.
What's the one thing that most holds back the types of changes that you'd like to make in the world?
Well, I think longer term, it's energy. I think that in both in terms of its proliferation and its scarcity, our modernity has been built upon a millennia of life on Earth that has become oil, which we've translated into a form of plastic, which has produced a kind of cheap energy going forward, but also energy that's scarce enough that it's organized our geopolitical conflicts. I think that our goal around energy should be not only to manage it in terms of scarcity, but also to imagine energy that is, in essence, not only radically renewable, but also radically free in an economic sense and in a political sense as well.
And what drives you to keep on innovating?
Well, I think it's the idea that oftentimes the things that we produce and that we put out into the world have effects that we can't possibly predict. And I think it is the hope that a lot of what we invent here and what we develop, that someone else somewhere that perhaps we'll never meet will pick up on something and make use of it in a way in which we couldn't possibly imagine, and will able to affect a change in his world and affect a change in our world that he wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't instigated it, and we wouldn't have been able to realize if he hadn't picked up on it. So it's really part of that ecology of invention that we're interested in.
Finally, what can we expect from you at the Guardians Activate Summit in New York?
Well, I think that we are in a very precarious position. I mean, we the Earthlings, we the citizens of some as yet to be identified cosmopolitan condition. And I think that we are not only grasping at the wrong answers, but we are grasping at the wrong problems.
Benjamin Bratton, thanks very much.